Leo stood on the edge of the sidewalk, the hot concrete burning through the thin soles of his sneakers. He stared at the building in front of him, a place that felt more like a courthouse than a bank. It was a modern structure, all shiny glass and steel beams, reflecting the busy street behind him. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, feeling the discomfort of a long day and an even longer night. He hadn't slept well. The stress of numbers that just wouldn't add up no matter how many times he calculated them, had kept him awake staring at the cracks in his ceiling. In his right hand, he held a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was a withdrawal slip he had found at the bottom of his backpack, wrinkled and soft from being carried around for weeks. He hadn't used it because he hadn't had any money to withdraw. Today, he was finally going to use it, but not for the reason he had once hoped. He took a deep breath, trying to steady the shaking in his hands. It wasn't fear of the bank itself, but fear of what walking inside represented. It was an admission of defeat. Leo was 20 years old, a college student with a grade point average that he was proud of, but a bank account that made him want to disappear. He had exactly $9.32 to his name. That was it. That was the sum total of his life's work for the last 2 semesters of eating instant noodles and working weekend shifts at a car wash that never seemed to dry his hands. The automatic glass doors in front of him slid open with a soft hiss, inviting him in. A burst of cool, air-conditioned air hit his face, a stark contrast to the humid heat of the afternoon. It felt good, but it also felt alien. He felt like he didn't belong in a place this clean, this organized. He adjusted the strap of his backpack on his shoulder. The bag was light. He had sold most of his textbooks the previous week just to cover the electricity bill. He was carrying only a binder with loose leaf paper and a cheap pen. Leo took a step forward, crossing the threshold. His sneakers made a soft squeaking sound on the polished tile floor. He paused for a moment, just inside the entrance, letting the doors close behind him. The silence of the lobby was heavy. It wasn't completely quiet. There was the low hum of computers, the distant sound of a printer whirring, and the hushed murmurs of voices. But to Leo, it felt like a vacuum. It was a serious place. A place for people who had plans and assets. He felt like an intruder in a sanctuary of wealth. He looked around, his eyes scanning the room. To his left, a row of desks sat empty, computer monitors glowing with screensavers of rolling green hills. To his right, a long line of velvet ropes created a maze for customers to walk through. Straight ahead were the teller stations, 3 of them with people standing behind thick glass barriers. Leo swallowed hard. His throat was dry. He joined the line, stepping behind a woman in a sharp business suit who was tapping furiously on her phone. She didn't look up. She didn't notice the college student standing 2 feet behind her, vibrating with anxiety. Leo looked at the back of her head, then down at his own clothes. He was wearing a faded t-shirt from a high school fun run and jeans that were fraying at the cuffs. He suddenly felt incredibly small. He tucked the withdrawal slip deeper into his palm, hiding it against his thigh. The minutes ticked by slowly. Leo's mind began to drift, as it often did when the silence got too loud. He thought about his mother. She lived 3 states away, in a small house that always smelled of coffee and laundry detergent. She worked double shifts as a nurse's aide. She didn't know about the $9.32. She didn't know that he was about to walk up to a counter and close his account, effectively pausing his education. She thought he was fine. He had told her he was fine. He had gotten good at lying over the phone, using a cheerful voice that didn't match the worry lines etching themselves into his forehead. He remembered the last time he had spoken to her. "How's school, honey?" she had asked. "It's great, Mom," he had lied. "Classes are going really well." He hadn't told her about the tuition notice that had been slipped under his door 2 days ago, the bright red letters demanding payment before the end of the week. He hadn't told her that his meal plan had expired because he couldn't afford the top-up. He didn't want to be another bill she had to worry about. The line moved forward. The businesswoman stepped up to a window, and Leo shuffled ahead, now standing at the front of the velvet ropes. He looked at the empty space where he would soon have to stand. He rehearsed the words in his head. "I'd like to close my account, please." It was a simple sentence, just 6 words, but they felt like stones in his mouth. He wondered if the teller would look at him with pity. He wondered if they would ask why. He hoped they wouldn't. He didn't think he could handle the embarrassment of explaining that he was broke, that his car needed a repair he couldn't afford, and that he was exhausted. He looked at the floor. The tiles were white and speckled with gray. They were spotless. He tried to focus on the pattern to calm his racing heart. He felt a heavy knot tightening in his stomach. It was the same feeling he got when he opened his fridge and saw nothing but a jar of mustard and a pitcher of water. It was the feeling of running out of road. Leo closed his eyes for a second. He thought about the car wash. He thought about the smell of the soap and the sound of the pressure washers. He thought about the way his back ached after 8 hours of wiping down windshields. He had worked so hard. It seemed unfair that hard work could still lead to this moment, standing in a bank lobby with less than $10 to his name, ready to cash out on his future. A voice pulled him out of his thoughts. "Next in line, please." Leo's eyes snapped open. The businesswoman was walking past him, tucking a receipt into her purse. The teller at window number 2 was looking at him expectantly, a polite, practiced smile on her face. The light above the window was green. It was his turn. He felt his feet root to the spot for a fraction of a second. A wave of dizziness washed over him, a combination of hunger and adrenaline. He needed to move. He needed to get this over with. He tightened his grip on the crumpled withdrawal slip in his hand. The paper was damp now from his sweat. "One step at a time," he whispered to himself, so quietly that no one else could hear. He forced his left foot forward, then his right. He walked toward the window, each step feeling heavier than the last. The distance seemed to stretch out, the polished floor turning into a mile-long bridge he had to cross. As he got closer, he could see the teller more clearly. She was middle-aged with reading glasses pushed up onto her forehead. She looked normal. She looked like someone who might not judge him, but fear is not rational. Leo felt the heat rise in his cheeks. He reached the counter and stood on the X taped to the floor. The glass partition was thick, and a small opening at the bottom allowed for the exchange of papers and money. The teller leaned forward, her voice coming through a speaker that crackled slightly. "Hi there," she said. "How can I help you today?" Leo looked at her. He looked at the computer screen in front of her, displaying numbers and graphs that probably represented thousands, maybe millions of dollars. Then he looked down at his own hand, slowly uncurling his fingers to reveal the sad, wrinkled piece of paper he had been clutching. Leo started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, trying to find the strength to say the words that would mark the end of his semester. He placed the slip on the counter. He felt a profound sense of sadness, a quiet grief for the life he was trying to build. He was just a poor college student, standing in a bank, about to admit that he couldn't make it work. He had no idea that in just a few moments, the entire trajectory of his life was about to change, but for now. All he felt was the crushing weight of the truth he had to speak. Leo stood frozen at the counter, his hand hovering over the cold granite surface. The withdrawal slip trembled slightly between his fingers. The teller, a woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses, was waiting for him to speak, but the words were stuck in his throat like a lump of dry bread. He opened his mouth to say, "I need to close my account," but before he could make a sound, a sharp noise broke his concentration. To his immediate left, at the next teller window, a commotion was brewing. An elderly woman stood there, clutching a large, leather handbag that looked heavy enough to pull her shoulder down. She was small, barely reaching the top of the counter, and she was dressed in a faded floral dress that had seen better days. She seemed distressed. Her hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, were shaking violently as she dug through her purse. "I know it's here," she mumbled to herself, her voice loud enough for Leo to hear. "I just had it. I put it right here." Leo hesitated. He watched her out of the corner of his eye. He didn't want to stare, but something about her frantic movements pulled his attention away from his own misery. She was pulling items out of her bag one by one and placing them on the counter. A set of keys, a tangled ball of yarn, a small mirror, a packet of tissues. She was creating a messy pile, her breathing becoming more and more ragged. "Ma'am, do you have your ID?" the teller at her window asked gently. The teller looked young, maybe Leo's age, and she sounded a mix of patience and hidden exhaustion. Yes, just a moment," the woman stammered. Her voice was thin and brittle. She sounded on the verge of tears. "I can't find my glasses, I can't see a thing." Leo felt a pang of sympathy in his chest. He knew that feeling, the panic of losing something vital when you were already running late, the embarrassment of holding up a line of people. He looked behind the woman. There was a short queue of 3 people waiting for her window. A man in a suit was checking his watch aggressively, sighing loudly. A younger woman with a stroller was bouncing a baby on her hip, looking tired. The atmosphere in the bank was shifting. The quiet hum of business was turning into a low buzz of annoyance. The man in the suit clicked his tongue, a sharp sound that seemed to echo in the lobby. "Some people shouldn't be out alone," he muttered under his breath. The comment stung Leo, even though it wasn't directed at him. He felt a sudden urge to help the old lady. He wanted to turn and tell the man to be patient, to show some respect, but he didn't. He was too tired, too defeated to start a confrontation. He turned back to his own teller, trying to focus on his own tragedy. "Sir," his teller prompted again. The slip, Leo looked down at his withdrawal slip. He was about to slide it under the glass. He was about to end his college career. But just as he moved his hand forward, the elderly woman let out a frustrated gasp. She jerked her purse upward, trying to fish something out from the very bottom. In her panic, she knocked a thick white envelope that had been sitting on the counter. It wasn't just any envelope. It was one of those security ones, the kind with the pattern inside to stop people from reading through the paper. But this one was unsealed. The flap was open. The envelope hit the edge of the counter, teetered for a split second as if deciding whether to stay or go, and then tumbled over the side. It didn't hit the floor right away. It caught the edge of the velvet rope barrier, spinning in the air. Then, with a soft, heavy thud, it landed on the polished tile floor right next to Leo's sneaker. Leo froze. The envelope had landed on its side, and because it was so stuffed, the impact caused the contents to shift. A wave of green paper spilled out, fanning across the floor like a deck of cards. Leo stared. He couldn't help it. His eyes locked onto the money. They were $100 bills, stacks of them. The envelope must have held thousands of dollars, maybe 5,000, maybe 10. It was a fortune. It was more money than Leo had seen in his entire life combined. It was more than his tuition, more than his rent, more than the car repair he had been ignoring for 6 months. The bank seemed to fall into slow motion. Leo looked up. The elderly woman was still digging in her purse, oblivious to the fact that her life savings were currently scattered on the dirty floor. The teller was looking down at her computer screen, waiting for the ID. The man in the suit was looking at his phone. The security guard near the door was facing the other way, watching the entrance. No one had seen the envelope fall, no one but Leo. He looked back down at the money. A $100 bill was resting right against the toe of his worn-out sneaker. It was crisp, new, and smelled faintly of ink. It looked like a ticket to freedom. A dark, heavy thought settled in Leo's mind. It happened in a flash, an instinct born of desperation. He was standing right next to it. He could just bend down. He could pretend to tie his shoe. He could scoop the envelope and the loose bills up in one motion and slip them into his backpack. He could walk out that door. His heart began to hammer against his ribs so hard it hurt. The rhythm was deafening in his ears. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. If he took it, he could pay his tuition today. He could go back to the dorms tonight and order a pizza, extra cheese, the works, instead of eating the stale crackers he had in his bag. He could call his mom and tell her not to send her next paycheck, that he was okay. He could fix the radiator in his car so he didn't have to shiver on the way to work. He could sleep. It was so easy. It was right there. The world owed him this, didn't it? He worked hard. He was a good student. He never caused trouble. The universe had finally thrown him a bone, and all he had to do was pick it up. Leo's hand twitched at his side. He shifted his weight, preparing to crouch down. He looked at the elderly woman again. She was still distracted, wiping her forehead with a tissue, muttering about her lost glasses. She had no idea. She wouldn't know it was him. By the time she realized the money was gone, he would be long gone. He took a breath. He bent his knees slightly. His fingers tingled with the anticipation of touching that money. He imagined the texture of the paper, the weight of the envelope in his pocket. He imagined the relief, the sweet, heavy relief of not having to worry for a few months. But then, as his eyes traced the scattered bills, he saw something else. He saw the shoes the woman was wearing. They were old orthopedic shoes, the leather cracked and peeling. The soles were worn down. Her ankles were swollen. He looked higher to the hem of her floral dress. It was patched in one place, sewn by hand with clumsy stitches. He looked at her hands again, still shaking as she searched for her ID. They were arthritic, the knuckles swollen and red. She looked so small, she looked so frail, and she looked terrified. Leo stopped breathing. The greed that had flared up in his chest began to cool, replaced by a cold wash of reality. That money wasn't the universe paying a debt to him. That money was her life. That money was her rent. That money was her medicine. That money was probably for someone else, a grandchild maybe, or a husband in a home. If he took it, she wouldn't just lose cash. She would lose her security. She would lose her peace of mind. She would stand in this bank and cry just like he had almost done. She would feel that same sinking, crushing feeling of the world collapsing on top of her. Leo looked at the $100 bill by his foot. It was just paper. It was green paper that the world decided had value. But looking at the woman, seeing her fear and her exhaustion, he realized that his honor had value too. It was the only thing he had left that he hadn't sold. He couldn't do it. He couldn't be the person who stole from a grandmother. He couldn't add his pain to hers. Leo closed his eyes for a second, fighting the last wave of temptation. His stomach growled, a physical reminder of his hunger. His bank account was still empty. His problems were still real. But he knew with a sudden, crystal-clear clarity that he would rather be broke with a clear conscience than rich with a stolen heart. He straightened his back. He took a deep breath. The air in the bank felt cooler now. He looked at the elderly woman who had finally stopped rummaging and was now looking at the counter with a blank expression, trying to remember what she was doing. Leo made his choice. It wasn't a choice of logic or finance. It was a choice of humanity. He took a step to the side, placing himself directly between the fallen money and the rest of the line, shielding the mess from view. He didn't do it to steal. He did it to protect. He bent down slowly, his knees popping, and reached out for the envelope. His hands were steady now. He wasn't grabbing for himself. He was picking up the pieces for someone else. He gathered the scattered bills with care, making sure not to crinkle them. He smoothed them out with his thumb. He slid them back into the thick white envelope, tucking the flap inside to keep them safe. He stood up, the envelope feeling heavy in his hand, but it was a different kind of weight now. It wasn't a burden, it was a responsibility. He turned toward the elderly woman and gently tapped her on the shoulder. "Ma'am," he said, his voice soft but steady. She jumped slightly, turning to look at him with wide, watery eyes. She looked startled, like a small animal caught in headlights. Leo held out the envelope. He saw the moment her eyes focused on it. He saw the flash of recognition, followed immediately by pure horror as she realized what she had almost lost. "Oh," she gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Oh, my stars. I think you dropped this," Leo said simply. He offered her a small, tired smile. "It fell on the floor." The woman stared at him, then at the envelope, then back at him. Her face crumpled. Her lip quivered. She didn't look like a stranger anymore. She looked like a human being who had just been spared a disaster. "You picked it up," she whispered, her voice trembling. Leo nodded. "Yes, ma'am, it's all there." The woman took the envelope from him, clutching it to her chest as if it were a newborn baby. She closed her eyes, tears leaking out from the corners and running down her wrinkled cheeks. She let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you," she breathed. "Young man, thank you, This was for my grandson, for his surgery. I was so scared." Leo felt a lump form in his own throat. He blinked rapidly, looking away. He hadn't known, he had just assumed. But hearing the reason made his knees feel weak. If he had taken that money, he couldn't even finish the thought. The guilt would have crushed him. "It's okay," Leo said, his voice a little rough. "I'm just glad I saw it." He stood there for a moment, the two of them connected by the near tragedy. The line behind them was still impatient. The man in the suit sighed again. But in that small bubble of space between Leo and the woman, there was a profound silence. Leo realized he had just given a gift far more valuable than money. He had given her peace. And in doing so, even though he was still broke, even though he still had $9.32 to his name, he felt a strange spark of warmth in his chest. He had done the right thing. It was the hardest thing he had done all day, but he had done it. He turned back to his own teller, the withdrawal slip still clutched in his other hand. The teller was looking at him with a strange expression on her face. She had seen the whole thing. She looked from Leo to the woman and then back to Leo. Leo felt a flush of embarrassment. He didn't want praise, he just wanted to finish his business and leave. He slid the withdrawal slip under the glass. "Close the account," he said quietly. All of it, but as he spoke, he felt the elderly woman's hand on his arm. Her grip was surprisingly strong. She wasn't letting him go just yet. The elderly woman's grip on Leo's forearm was surprisingly strong. Her fingers, thin and pale, dug into his sleeve as if she were afraid he might vanish into thin air. Leo looked down at her, his heart still pounding a heavy rhythm against his ribs. He had been seconds away from walking out that door with her money, and the weight of that near mistake was settling on his shoulders like a lead blanket. "You saved me," she whispered again, her voice trembling. Her eyes were swimming with tears, magnified by the thick glasses she had finally managed to locate in her purse. "You have no idea. You simply have no idea." Leo felt a hot flush creep up his neck. He didn't feel like a hero, he felt like a fraud who had barely dodged a bullet. "It's okay, ma'am," he said softly, trying to step back to break the connection. He wanted to retreat behind his wall of invisibility. "Anyone would have done it." "No," she said firmly, shaking her head so vigorously that her silver hair bounced. "No, young man, not everyone. I have been standing here for 10 minutes and no one said a word. They just sighed. They looked at their watches. They looked through me." She paused, her gaze piercing him. "But you saw me?" The teller at the window, the one with the reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, was watching them closely. She had paused her work, her hands hovering over the keyboard. The young woman behind the glass had seen Leo's hesitation, the way his hand had twitched, and then the way he had bent down to do the right thing. She offered him a small, approving nod, but Leo couldn't meet her eyes. He felt exposed. The impatient man in the suit behind the elderly woman cleared his throat again. It was a loud, abrasive sound designed to cut through the moment. "Excuse me," he snapped. "Some of us have jobs to get back to. Can we move this along?" The elderly woman ignored him. She was focused entirely on Leo. With shaking hands, she opened the thick white envelope again. The sight of the stack of $100 bills made Leo's stomach lurch. It was a lifeline right there within reach. "Please," she said, pulling a bill from the stack. She held it out to him. It was crisp and new, the portrait of Benjamin Franklin staring up at him. "Take this, please. It's the least I can do. You bought me time. You bought me peace." Leo stared at the money. $100. It was a week of groceries. It was a tank of gas and a bill paid on time. It was a hot meal that wasn't instant noodles. His hand twitched at his side. It would be so easy to take it. It wouldn't even be stealing. It was a gift. A reward for being honest. Who would blame him? But as he looked at the bill, he saw the woman's shoes again. He saw the frayed hem of her dress. He saw the terror that had been in her eyes moments ago. "Ma'am," Leo said, his voice cracking. He pushed her hand away gently, refusing to touch the bill. "I can't take that." "Nonsense," she insisted, pushing it closer. "I insist. You're a good boy. Good boys should be rewarded." Leo took a deep breath, steadying himself. "If I take money for doing the right thing," he said, the words coming out slowly, "then it wasn't really the right thing, was it? It was just a job." The woman froze. She looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for sarcasm or pride. She found neither. She saw only a tired, poor college student who was choosing his dignity over a quick fix. She slowly lowered the bill, tucking it back into the envelope with trembling fingers. "You are a rare one," she murmured. "A rare one indeed." Behind them, the man in the suit groaned. "Oh, for the love of lady, just close your account or move. Some of us have real business to conduct." Leo felt a flash of anger. He turned his head slightly, glaring at the man. "She's trying to conduct her business," Leo said, his voice low but firm. "You can wait." The man blinked, surprised that the kid in the faded t-shirt had spoken back. He opened his mouth to argue, but something in Leo's eyes made him think better of it. He looked away, muttering under his breath. Leo turned back to the elderly woman. "You should finish up," he told her gently. "Don't lose that envelope again." She nodded, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "Thank you," she whispered one last time. She turned back to the teller window, clutching the envelope to her chest like a shield. Leo turned back to his own teller. The shame was gone now, replaced by a hollow kind of pride. He was still broke. He was still going to have to close his account. But the crushing weight of desperation had lifted just a little. He had looked into the abyss of his own greed and walked away. That had to count for something. He slid his withdrawal slip under the glass partition again. "I need to close my account," he said. The words came out easier this time. They were just words. They didn't define him. The teller looked at him, then at the slip, then back at the elderly woman who was now finishing her transaction at the next window. The teller picked up the slip. "I." "Okay," she said. She didn't look at him with pity anymore. She looked at him with respect. "I can help you with that. Just give me one moment." Leo nodded. He leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him drained. He watched the elderly woman finish her business. She gathered her purse, tucked the envelope deep inside, and zipped the bag shut with a decisive asterisk zip asterisk. She patted the bag, checking that it was secure. She turned to leave. As she walked past Leo, she stopped. She didn't offer him money again. Instead, she reached out and squeezed his hand. Her skin was cool and dry like parchment paper. "God bless you," she said softly, and then she was gone, shuffling toward the exit, leaving a wake of silence behind her. Leo watched the automatic glass doors slide open for her. She stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, disappearing into the crowd on the sidewalk. She was just a stranger, a random encounter in a bank lobby. In 5 minutes, she would probably forget his face, but he knew he would never forget hers. "Sir," the teller's voice broke through his thoughts. Leo turned back. "Yeah, I just need your signature right here," she said, sliding a form under the glass. "For the closure." Leo picked up the cheap pen from the counter. It was attached to a chain. He looked at the line where he was supposed to sign. It was a short line, just enough space for a name. He signed it with a shaky hand. "Leo." He handed the pen back. The teller typed a few more things into her computer. The printer behind her whirred to life, spitting out a receipt. She counted out the cash, $9.32. It was a pathetic little stack, a 5, 4 ones, a quarter, a nickel, and 2 pennies. "Here you go," she said, sliding the money under the glass. "I'm sorry about the situation." Leo looked at the small pile of cash. It was the sum total of his financial life. It wasn't enough to buy a future. But as he scooped the coins and bills into his palm, he realized something. He had walked in here feeling like a victim. He was walking out feeling like a man. He put the money in his pocket. He didn't put it in his wallet because he didn't have one. He just shoved it deep into his jeans, feeling the cold metal of the coins against his leg. "Thank you," Leo said to the teller. He tried to smile. It was a small, tired smile, but it was genuine. He turned away from the counter. He walked toward the exit, passing the velvet ropes and the line of people. The man in the suit was now at the window, his face scrunched up in annoyance. Leo didn't look at him. He didn't look at anyone. He pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped out into the heat. The air was thick and humid, the sun beating down on the pavement. It was a harsh contrast to the cool, sterile air of the bank. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the city noise wash over him. The honking of horns, the chatter of pedestrians, the distant rumble of a bus engine. He had $9.32. He had no tuition. He had no meal plan. He had a long walk back to his dorm because he couldn't afford the bus. But as he stood there, he felt a strange lightness in his chest. He thought about the envelope on the floor. He thought about the temptation. He thought about how close he had come to changing who he was. He adjusted his backpack on his shoulder. He started walking, his sneakers scuffing against the concrete. He didn't know what he was going to do tomorrow. He didn't know how he was going to fix his life. But for the first time all day, he didn't feel like crying. He felt ready to face whatever came next. Behind him, inside the bank, the teller picked up her phone. She dialed a number and waited. "Hey, it's me," she said into the receiver, her voice low. "You are not going to believe what just happened at window 2. Leo walked out of the bank, and the heat of the afternoon hit him like a physical wall. The air was thick and humid, the kind of weather that makes your shirt stick to your back within seconds. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, blinking in the bright sunlight, trying to adjust to the noise of the street after the quiet hum of the bank lobby. Cars rushed by, their tires hissing on the hot asphalt. A bus roared past, belching out a cloud of exhaust that made Leo cough. He stepped to the side, out of the flow of pedestrians, and leaned against the cool brick of the building. He needed a second. He needed to breathe. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled wad of cash the teller had given him, $9.32. He smoothed out the bills on his thigh, a 5 and 4 ones. The coins were warm from his body heat. He looked at the money and a strange feeling washed over him. It was a mix of relief and profound sadness. He had done the right thing, he knew that. He had looked temptation in the eye and walked away. But doing the right thing didn't fill his stomach and it didn't pay his tuition. He was still broke. He was still exhausted. And now he had to walk all the way back to campus because he couldn't afford the bus fare. He tucked the money away, zipping it into the front pocket of his backpack for safekeeping. He adjusted the straps on his shoulders, wincing as the friction rubbed against a sore spot on his collarbone. He looked down the street, calculating the distance. It was about 3 miles. In this heat, it would take him almost an hour. "Okay," he whispered to himself, one foot in front of the other. He pushed off the wall and started walking. He kept his head down, watching his sneakers hit the pavement. His mind was a jumble of thoughts. He thought about the elderly woman. He wondered if she had made it to wherever she was going. He wondered if her grandson would be okay. He said a silent prayer for them, a habit he had picked up from his mother, even though he hadn't been to church in years. He walked past a coffee shop, the smell of roasted beans drifting out the door. His stomach growled loudly. He ignored it. He walked past a bookstore, the displays in the window showing expensive textbooks that made his head hurt. He looked away. He was about 2 blocks from the bank when he heard a voice behind him. "Excuse me, young man, wait." Leo stopped. He turned around, squinting against the sun. He expected to see someone asking for directions or maybe a panhandler needing change. But what he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Running down the sidewalk toward him was the bank manager. Leo recognized him from the lobby, a tall man in a crisp charcoal suit, the kind of suit that cost more than Leo's entire semester of books. The manager was moving fast, his tie flapping over his shoulder, his face red from exertion. Leo's first instinct was panic. His heart skipped a beat. Did I do something wrong, he thought. Did they think I stole something? Did I sign the wrong paper? He took a step back, his hands instinctively going up in a defensive posture. I didn't do anything, he stammered as the manager reached him. The manager bent over, hands on his knees, gasping for air. He held up a hand, signaling for Leo to wait. "Just give me a second," the man panted. "I'm not as young as I used to be." Leo stood frozen, his mind racing through the events of the last 20 minutes. He had returned the money. He had closed his account. He had been polite. Why was the manager chasing him down the street? The manager finally straightened up, wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked at Leo, and to Leo's surprise, the man wasn't angry. He was smiling. It was a wide, incredulous smile. "Son," the manager said, still breathing a little hard, "you move fast. I've been trying to catch you since you walked out the door." "Is there a problem?" Leo asked, his voice tight. No problem," the manager said quickly. He shook his head. "Quite the opposite, actually. I need you to come back to the bank with me." Leo looked at the distance he had already walked. He looked at the manager's shiny shoes. "Did I leave something behind?" he asked. "In a manner of speaking," the manager said. He reached out and gently touched Leo's elbow, guiding him back the way he had come. "Please, it will only take a moment. It's important." Leo didn't have much of a choice. The manager's grip was firm but kind. He turned around and walked back toward the bank, his confusion growing with every step. When they reached the entrance, the automatic doors slid open again. The cool air hit them, a welcome relief from the humidity. The manager ushered him inside, bypassing the long line of velvet ropes. Leo felt the eyes of the customers on him. The man in the suit who had been impatient earlier was still there, and he stared openly at Leo, being escorted past the queue by the boss. The manager led him to a door marked private and held it open. "Right in here," he said. Leo stepped into a small, quiet office. It had a desk, a computer, and 2 chairs. The walls were bare except for a calendar and a framed certificate. It smelled like coffee and old paper. "Sit down, son," the manager said, closing the door and moving behind the desk. Leo sat on the edge of the chair, his backpack on his lap. He felt out of place. His faded t-shirt looked grayer in here, his jeans more worn. He looked at the manager, who was sitting down and shuffling through a stack of papers. "First," the manager said, looking over his reading glasses, "let me introduce myself. I'm Mr. Thompson. I run this branch. I'm Leo," he said quietly. "Nice to meet you, Leo." Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, studying Leo with an intensity that made him squirm. Now I want to ask you a question, and I want you to answer honestly. Leo nodded, bracing himself. The woman at the counter earlier, Mr. Thompson said. The elderly lady with the floral dress. You helped her. She dropped her envelope, Leo said simply. I just picked it up. You picked it up, Mr. Thompson repeated slowly. He let out a low whistle. Leo, do you know who that woman was? Leo shook his head. No, sir, just a customer. Mr. Thompson chuckled, a dry, raspy sound. Just a customer, he muttered. He leaned forward, placing his hands on the desk. That was Mrs. Gable. Her family owns about half the commercial real estate in this city. She's been a customer of this bank for 40 years. She's also the biggest private donor to the city's college scholarship fund. Leo blinked. He didn't know what to say. He thought about her worn shoes and the patched dress. She didn't look like a millionaire. She looked like a grandmother. Oh, was all he could manage. Here's the thing, Leo, Mr. Thompson said, his voice turning serious. Mrs. Gable called me about 5 minutes ago. She was crying. Leo's stomach dropped. Crying? Was she okay? Did I upset her? No, son, Mr. Thompson said softly. She was crying because she was grateful. She told me she was so flustered, so confused by the heat and the noise, that she dropped an envelope containing $8,000 in cash. Leo's eyes widened. $8,000. The number hung in the air. It was a fortune. It was 2 years of rent. It was a new car. It was freedom. She told me, Mr. Thompson continued, that she was in line behind you. She saw you standing there. She saw the way you looked at that floor, and she saw what you did next. Leo looked down at his hands. They were rough and calloused from his job at the car wash. She told me you could have walked away a rich man, Mr. Thompson said. She told me she offered you a reward and you turned it down. She told me you looked like you needed the money, but you gave it back anyway. She said, and I quote, that boy has a heart of gold, but he has holes in his shoes. Leo shifted his feet, feeling the worn soles pressing against the floor. So, Mr. Thompson said, sliding a piece of paper across the desk. She asked me to do something, and I'm happy to do it. Leo looked at the paper. It was a bank form, but the header was different. It wasn't a withdrawal slip. It was a transfer authorization. Mrs. Gable has instructed the bank, Mr. Thompson said, tapping the paper, to transfer funds to your student account immediately. She wants to cover your tuition for the remainder of the year. And he paused for effect. She wants to give you a living stipend so you don't have to work 3 jobs just to eat. Leo stared at the paper. The numbers swam before his eyes. He couldn't process it. It didn't make sense. It was too much. It felt like a dream he was about to wake up from. I can't accept that, Leo stammered, his voice shaking. That's too much. I didn't do it for money. I couldn't steal from her. I know you didn't, Mr. Thompson said gently. That's exactly why she wants you to have it. Leo, listen to me. In this business, I see a lot of people. I see people with millions of dollars who have never done an honest day's work in their lives. And I see people like you who work themselves to the bone and still have nothing to show for it. Today, you made a choice. You chose to be a good man, Mrs. Gable wants to make sure that being a good man doesn't cost you your future. Mr. Thompson slid a pen across the desk. Just sign here to confirm the account details for the transfer. Leo looked at the pen. It was a nice pen, heavy and silver. He looked at the paper. It was a lifeline. I don't know what to say, Leo whispered. His vision blurred. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear his eyes. He felt a lump in his throat the size of a golf ball. Say thank you, Mr. Thompson said, his voice thick with emotion. And promise me you'll keep being the man you were today. Leo reached out. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped the pen. He gripped it tight. He signed his name, Leo. When he looked up, Mr. Thompson was smiling at him. It wasn't the polite, professional smile of a bank manager anymore. It was the smile of a father or a grandfather. It was a smile of pride. Now, Mr. Thompson said, standing up, I think you have some classes to attend and maybe go buy yourself a decent meal. You look like you haven't eaten in a week. Leo stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He felt lighter, as if the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders and replaced with something warm and bright. Thank you, Leo managed to say. Thank you, Mr. Thompson, and please thank Mrs. Gable. I will, the manager promised. He walked Leo to the door and opened it. She left her number for you. She wants you to call her later. She wants to meet her grandson's potential classmate. Leo walked out of the office. The bank lobby was still busy. The man in the suit was still impatient, but Leo didn't see them. He walked toward the exit in a daze. He pushed open the glass doors and stepped out into the sun. The heat was still there. The street was still noisy, but everything looked different. The world wasn't a gray, oppressive place anymore. It was full of color. It was full of possibility. He stood on the sidewalk, clutching the piece of paper with Mrs. Gable's phone number written on it. He looked at his cracked sneakers. He thought about the $9.32 in his pocket. It was still there, but now so was his future. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the hot, humid air. He wasn't just a poor college student anymore. He was a student with a future. He was a man with a story. And for the first time in a long time, he couldn't wait to see what happened next.